Long before cities, before engines, before the sound of steel cutting through ice, there was the howl. It rose from the endless white of the Siberian Arctic, where wind and silence ruled the earth. There, in a world that punished the weak and rewarded only the enduring, a partnership was born between human and dog, a bond written not in comfort, but in survival. Thousands of years ago, the Chukchi people of northeastern Siberia lived on the very edge of existence. They were hunters, reindeer herders, and travelers of frozen seas. To cross their world meant death for most, but not for them. They had companions with thick double coats, almond eyes, and hearts that burned hotter than any campfire in the snow. Those dogs were the ancestors of the Siberian Husky, bred not for size or aggression, but for stamina and spirit. The Chukchi dogs were unlike any others. They could run for hours through blizzards, pulling light sleds over endless ice without complaint. They slept curled around children to keep them warm, hunted beside men, and guided tribes across the tundra when stars were their only compass. In that land of perpetual winter, dogs weren't pets, they were lifelines. And the Chukchi did not own them as possessions, they shared their lives as equals. To choose a breeding pair was a sacred act. Only the most intelligent, loyal, and enduring were allowed to pass on their blood. Over centuries, this quiet ritual shaped a creature perfectly designed for the Arctic. Small enough to conserve heat, strong enough to pull, fast enough to outrun exhaustion, and gentle enough to trust with human children. Their coats reflected the land itself, white as snow, grey as storm clouds, black as polar nights. Their eyes mirrored the northern sky, glacial blue or amber like the firelight of a winter camp. They were living symbols of balance between power and grace. When outsiders finally arrived in Siberia, they couldn't believe what they saw. Here were dogs that could travel 80 miles in a day, survive on scraps, and still wag their tails at dusk. A British explorer once wrote, "They do not run because they are ordered. They run because it is joy." That joy, the love of movement, of freedom, became the soul of the husky. It was more than obedience, it was purpose. In the late 19th century, whispers of these remarkable dogs began to spread beyond Siberia. Traders and explorers carried stories of teams that could outrun reindeer and endure storms that stopped horses in their tracks. When the world learned their name, Siberian Husky, it carried a sense of mystery, wildness, and endurance. But destiny had more in store for them than pulling sleds through snow, because soon a gold rush, a race, and a deadly disease would lift these Arctic spirits from the frozen edge of the world to the front pages of history. From the frozen heart of Siberia they would run, not just for their masters, but for humanity itself. And when the world was watching, they would prove that courage could wear a coat of fur. In the winter of 1925, the world seemed to pause beneath an endless veil of snow. In the remote Alaskan town of Nome, children were dying. A mysterious infection, diphtheria, had struck, and the nearest supply of antitoxin was over 600 miles away in Anchorage. No plane could fly through the storm. No ship could cut through the frozen Bering Sea. The world's last hope rested on one ancient means of travel: dog sleds. From the village of Nenana to Nome stretched the most treacherous trail on Earth. Ice, mountain, and wind so cold it could kill a man in minutes. But 20 mushers and more than 100 sled dogs answered the call. Among them were the dogs of Leonhard Sepala, a Norwegian musher whose team of Siberian Huskies had earned a reputation for speed and endurance. For 5 days and nights, the antitoxin was passed from one team to the next in a relay known as the Great Race of Mercy. They ran through blizzards so dense the world turned white, through winds that peeled flesh and froze breath mid-air. Sepala and his lead dog Togo took on the most dangerous leg, 260 miles across the open ice of Norton Sound. In temperatures below -50 degrees Celsius, Togo led the team over cracking frozen seas where one misstep meant death. When night fell and the storm rose, Sepala could see nothing. He trusted only the dog ahead of him, the one who seemed to sense the path by instinct alone. Hour after hour, Togo pulled through darkness, ice, and wind. When the ice finally broke beneath them, he leapt into the freezing water, dragging the sled back to solid ground. They covered a distance no other team could have survived. When Sepala handed off the serum, both man and dog collapsed from exhaustion, heroes who would never seek glory. The final stretch fell to another team, Gunnar Carson and his lead dog Balto. Through the night, blinded by snow and frozen lashes, Balto led his team the last 53 miles to Nome. At 5 in the morning, on February 2nd, 1925, they stumbled into town with the precious vials of antitoxin. The disease was stopped. Thousands of lives were saved. And for the first time, the world looked to the north and saw not wilderness, but valor. News spread like fire. Headlines screamed, "Balto saves the children of Nome!" Statues were raised, parades held. Balto became a symbol of heroism, the face of an entire breed. But those who knew the trail remembered another name, Togo, the dog who had led the longest and most dangerous leg through the ice. 2 heroes, 1 legacy. Together, they proved what the Chukchi people had always known, that the Siberian Husky is not driven by fear or obedience, but by the fire within, a love of running, of giving everything, of saving those who cannot save themselves. In the years that followed, the Husky became a worldwide sensation. Kennels sprang up across North America. Explorers wanted them, racing teams needed them, and families admired their wolf-like beauty. But beyond the headlines and medals, the Husky's spirit remained the same, pure, untamed, and bound to the snow. When Balto was laid to rest years later, his body was preserved in a museum, a tribute to the dog that carried hope through a storm. Togo was buried on a hill overlooking the sea he once conquered, his ashes placed beneath a sled that had touched the edge of impossibility. Even today, their names echo in the howls of huskies that run under the northern lights. They run not for competition, but for heritage, for a memory older than nations, older than roads. Because for the Siberian Husky, every stride is a story, and every breath in the frozen air is a promise kept. They were born of ice and loyalty, forged in storms that would break lesser creatures. And from that legendary race to Nome, they earned a truth that no time can erase. That some heroes run on 4 legs and leave footprints that never melt. When the drums of war echoed across the world once more, the Siberian Husky left the quiet tundra and stepped onto a new kind of battlefield. The year was 1939, and humanity was again marching toward chaos. For generations, the Husky had carried life through the Arctic. Now it would carry survival through war. As the Second World War engulfed continents, the freezing north became a critical frontier. Armies could build tanks and planes, But in the deep snow and thin air of Alaska, Greenland, and the Aleutian Islands, only one engine could be trusted to start every time, a heartbeat on 4 legs. The U.S. Army Air Corps and the Canadian military began recruiting sled dogs for search and rescue operations. The Husky was the obvious choice, small enough to maneuver through tight ravines, light enough not to break the snow crust, strong enough to haul men and supplies where no machine could go. In frozen airfields and secret outposts, soldiers learned the art of mushing. They called it Operation Arctic. Teams of Siberian Huskies carried ammunition, food, and wounded pilots through blizzards where compasses failed. Their paws left tracks beside tire prints that froze solid before dawn. One handler later wrote, "When our radios went silent, the dogs never did. They were the line between death and coming home." In the Aleutian campaign, Huskies dragged heavy sleds through wind that ripped tents to shreds. When planes crashed into mountainsides, it was often a Husky team that found the survivors first. They could smell life beneath 10 feet of snow, following a heartbeat instead of a trail. Across the Atlantic, on Greenland's icy coast, Allied meteorologists depended on dog teams to transport weather instruments vital for forecasting battles thousands of miles away. Each forecast, each coded message that guided Allied planes was made possible by dogs pulling sleds through endless white. Not all served with armies. Many worked with explorers and scientists charting the polar world. During the Cold War, Huskies carried geologists across ice shelves in search of uranium and rare minerals. They became part of expeditions that mapped the very top of the planet. And yet, in every story of courage, the same theme returned: loyalty. The Huskies didn't fight for flags or ideologies. They fought for the people who harnessed them, for the simple trust that had bound them to humankind for thousands of years. When peace finally came, the world celebrated its soldiers, but few remembered the ones who never wore medals. Many of the wartime Huskies were left behind in remote bases, their job done, their service forgotten. But for those who returned home, a new purpose awaited. Search and rescue teams in Alaska, Canada, and the U.S. National Guard continued to rely on their instincts. They trained beside helicopters and snowmobiles, proving that even in the age of engines, there was no replacement for intuition born of ice. In 1963, during a blizzard near Mount Washington, a Husky named Chinook led rescuers to a missing climber after every instrument failed. The mission commander later said, "He didn't find a man. He found hope." From war zones to wilderness, the Husky's courage never depended on orders. It came from something deeper, a code written in its blood since the first nights beside the Chukchi fires. As nations advanced into the modern era, the world moved faster, louder, warmer. But in the silence of the Arctic, where time still freezes and breath crystallizes mid-air, you can still hear the rhythm that once guided armies and explorers alike. The whisper of runners on snow, the steady pant of endurance, the harmony between human and dog. That sound is history itself. And the Siberian Husky is its heartbeat. When the age of exploration faded and the sound of sleds gave way to engines, most working dogs found their purpose slipping away. But the Siberian Husky was never defined by work alone. It was defined by freedom. From the frozen frontiers of the past, the breed stepped gracefully into a new century. No longer a tool of survival, it became a symbol of spirit, the unbroken connection between wilderness and home. By the 1970s, Huskies had found their way into cities, suburbs, and family homes. People were captivated by their piercing blue eyes, their wolf-like coats, and their playful nature. They looked like creatures from another world, and in many ways they were. But behind that beauty lived the same wild heart that once pulled sleds through blizzards. Owners soon learned that a husky could be loving and loyal, yet stubborn and free-spirited. You could train one, but never truly own one. In backyards, many escaped fences, running for miles without looking back. Not out of disobedience, but out of instinct, a calling older than memory. For the husky, motion is life, stillness is surrender. Those who understood this became part of something remarkable, a partnership built not on control, but on trust. Husky owners discovered that to live with one is to live with the essence of adventure. Every day a reminder that the wild still runs beside us. In Alaska and Canada, sled racing was reborn, not as survival but as sport. Events like the Iditarod Trail Sled Dog Race became legendary, spanning over 1,000 miles of brutal terrain. Teams of huskies thundered across the tundra, their breath rising like ghosts in the cold. Each musher knew this wasn't competition, it was communion. Some dogs were pure Siberians, others a mix of Alaskan lines, but all carried the same ancestral fire. They ran not for fame or reward, but for the rhythm of snow beneath their paws, the sound of destiny calling them forward. At home, huskies found a different kind of stage. They became companions to families, guardians of children, and symbols of resilience. Their expressive faces and howling speech made them internet stars long before viral videos existed. They could be dramatic, comical, and endlessly talkative. Yet behind every playful bark lies the dignity of an ancient breed. Veterinarians and trainers often say, "You don't train a husky, you negotiate." It's true, they are thinkers, decision-makers, creatures of instinct and independence. Their intelligence is not about obedience, it's about understanding. A husky will listen, evaluate, and sometimes decide you're wrong. And that, perhaps, is their greatest charm. In modern service, they continue to shine. Search and rescue teams still use them in extreme cold, trusting their intuition where machines fail. Therapy huskies visit hospitals, their calm presence soothing trauma survivors and children with anxiety. Even in warmth, their energy radiates like a small sun, never still, never subdued. They remind us that loyalty doesn't mean submission. It means standing beside someone, freely, willingly, completely. Those who share their homes with a husky often describe it the same way. They don't feel like they own a dog. They feel like they live with a piece of the north, a whisper of snow and stars. At night, when the world grows quiet, many huskies still tilt their heads back and howl, not out of sadness, but remembrance. It's the same cry that once echoed across frozen tundra, a song to the moon, to the pack, to the endless wild beyond the fence. That sound connects centuries, from Chukchi tribes and Arctic explorers to the families who now hold their leashes. It's a reminder that civilization may have changed the world, but not the heart of the husky. Because beneath the soft fur and playful grin lives something ancient, a spark that refuses to die. The same spark that once led Togo through the storm, that pulled explorers to safety, that kept the fire of humanity alive in the coldest corners of the earth. Today, the Siberian Husky stands as a bridge between the wild and the familiar, between instinct and affection. They teach us that freedom doesn't mean distance, it means choice. And love, when given freely, is the most powerful leash of all. Every legend begins with survival, but the ones that last, the ones whispered through generations, are born from something deeper, the will to endure and the grace to remain pure through change. The Siberian Husky is one of those legends. From the icy cradle of Siberia to the warmth of family homes, the Husky's journey has always been a story of balance between wilderness and trust, instinct and companionship, freedom and loyalty. They were shaped by the Earth's harshest winters, yet they never became hardened. They learned to live with the world, not against it. And that is why, even now, when you look into a husky's eyes, you see not domestication, but understanding. They are reminders of what humanity once was: resilient, fearless, connected to nature. For the Chukchi, they were survival. For Sepala, Togo, and Balto, they were salvation. For soldiers and explorers, they were lifelines through snow and silence. And for families today, they are laughter, mischief, and love wrapped in fur. Each era has asked the husky to serve in a new way, and each time they have answered with heart. But modern life has given the breed a new challenge: comfort. In a world of central heating and small apartments, the husky's soul still yearns for motion. Too many are kept as ornaments, symbols of beauty without purpose. And yet, even then, you can still see that flicker in their eyes, a silent question. When do we run again? That question is more than instinct. It's a legacy. Because for them, running isn't escape. It's connection to earth, wind, and heartbeat. There are still places where that spirit is alive. In Alaska, at dawn, the dogs line up before a race. Their paws dance in the snow, their breaths forming clouds of silver. The musha calls their names, and the line quivers with anticipation. No one forces them to run. They were born for it. And when the signal comes, they surge forward as one, a living river of motion and purpose. The sound they make is not noise, it's history. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson the husky leaves us with, that freedom and loyalty can exist together. You can follow your own path and still belong to something greater. You can love the wild and still guard the home. Even after a century in our company, the husky has not forgotten who it is. It has simply expanded what it means to be wild. To be a husky is to be alive, in every breath, every heartbeat, every stride against the wind. One explorer once said, "The husky does not serve man. He runs beside him." And in those few words lies the truth of their spirit. Someday, perhaps, the engines will quiet, the snow will fall untouched again, and out there, beneath the aurora's glow, you'll hear it, the long rising song of a husky calling to the stars. It isn't just a howl, it's a promise that no matter how far humanity drifts from nature, some part of us will always remember the run. Because legends don't fade, they evolve, and the Siberian Husky will always remind us who we were and who we still can be: strong, loyal, fearless, and free. They are not simply dogs of snow. They are echoes of eternity, carrying the heartbeat of the North wherever they go.